So, good morning. What I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you. You might be in twos or threes, and just introduce yourself and sort of notice what that does to your sense of yourself and your sense of being here. And also tell them, ask them, so why have you come to this talk this morning? So that's what I'd like you to do. Is that clear? So turn to the person, introduce yourself, maybe in twos or threes, find out why they've come to this talk this morning, and notice how it affects your sense of yourself. Okay, off you go. So, do you notice any change in your experience of yourself? Feel free to shout out.
Feel visible.
Visible. You feel visible?
I felt suddenly visible, yeah. Right. I felt that these other people were visible to me. Like
right.
There's a sudden depth through them that wasn't there a second ago before they started to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Commonality, just a bit of a connection that somebody else is here, Buddhafield, here for the talk, they're doing their thing, I'm doing my thing, but I can kind of touch base here.
Thank you.
I felt a little bridge had come into existence between me and them, over which things could cross.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anybody find it sort of, oh, what's this about? I've come for a talk, Any of that? That's kind of also valuable information.
Sense of connection that I didn't have.
Okay, so there's several things that have led me. It's interesting that it's kind of like the experience of myself standing here, having got you to talk, and it's kind of like I can relax and sort of think, it's okay. I know quite a number of people, and I can just sort of feel my feet on the ground. But it's the sense of self is where I feel isolated. It's a really painful experience, and I think it's becoming more and more endemic in Western culture and in the way the world is going. And I actually don't know, I know some things I want to talk about today, but I don't know how to string them together. So you're going to have to do that for me. So they're all linked. I know they're all linked because they're all in my head. But I'm going to talk about them and see if you can make sense of them. So several things that are with me whilst I'm standing here. One, I was at a conference on why psychotherapy works, given by one of the world's leading authorities on neuroscience. And he was talking about the nature of the mind, the nature of self, and why psychotherapy works. It was a fantastic workshop. And I also liked this guy that I was thinking about him as I was standing here. And he's kind of doing this workshop to 300 psychotherapists and neuroscientists, and he's just kind of standing there, and he was just so casual and light, and yet it was so profound. And I guess that he'd given the same workshop and presentation hundreds of times, so he was able to kind of take it as it comes. I haven't a clue what I'm going to talk about generally, but I am going to tell some stories. So he's with me, and some of the ideas that I got from that workshop I want to try and share. I was also coming to the festival, and I was asked would I give a Dharma talk, and I thought, no, not really. But then I worked for the Karuna Trust, and the Karuna Trust said, look, we need somebody to promote Karuna. Can you do a talk to promote the fundraising appeals at Buddhafield? And again I sort of thought, not really. But then I kind of, I realised how I could do it, because I'm very busy, and I didn't want to sort of have to sit down and do a lot of thinking and writing of a talk. But I realised I could maybe talk about the stuff I got from Dan Siegel, and also my experience of travelling in India. And there was a particular experience of travelling in India which I will tell you about. But before that, I'll just give a bit more context. So you're following me at the moment, if you've got all the different parts. So what I want you to do is think about all those different parts that seem completely random, which is the nature of my mind. So, September last year, I'd just come back from 4 months on retreat in Spain on the ordination course, the men's ordination course. And I came back to England and I had to find a place to live. So 4 months in the Spanish mountains and suddenly back in London looking for a community for 6 guys. It wasn't an easy landing. Yeah. Anyway, we managed to find a place, quite small, and we moved in, and some of the guys found it a bit tough, sharing rooms, small flat, and the noise and bustle of London. And I have to say, for the first 2 months, I don't think I slept through the night, which normally I sleep quite easily. But I could hear the bin men every morning sweeping the streets. I no longer hear the bin men, but I'm sure they still sweep the streets because they look clean, you know. But the guys, one of the guys particularly, he really struggled with being in London. He's kind of used to having a garden. He's used to living, you know, more suburban or out in nature, and he's there just off the Roman Road in London, Bethnal Green. Every day he goes to the park for a walk, kind of keep his sanity. Anyway, so he goes for a walk with one of the other community members, and they're kind of developing a bond of connection and friendship. And they go to the park, and they sit down by the pond. You know, 2 Buddhist men chatting intently. You probably, those of you who've ever been on retreat will kind of know what I'm talking about. And they sit down, one there and one there, and they're just kind of talking. And then they kind of sit quietly with each other. And this 5-year-old girl, about 4 or 5, she's wandering around and she's looking at the ducks. Then she sees these 2 guys. And she walks over and kind of gets in between them and sits down. And the mother kind of looks over to sort of see, are these guys okay with this? And the guys just kind of, they're just sort of, you know, they have to move a little bit so she can get in. And it was just such a beautiful image of this girl. I don't, you know, in my imagining, it's kind of like, what was going on for this little girl? She kind of sees these guys, thinks, that's a perfect place for me to sit. I'm going to go and sit there. You know, it's sort of completely trusting, completely open, and she goes and sits down amongst these guys. So that's one story. So again, try and make the connections between that and me here to talk about Karnar, talk about Dan Siegel and the neuroscience. So I read a book called Heat. Who's read the book Heat by George Monbiot? Yeah, a little bit of it, yeah. When I read that book, I realised actually flying is seriously unethical. Flying is one of the most detrimental things we can do to the environment. And, you know, sometimes you wish you hadn't read a book. Because actually before that I kind of knew flying is not that good for the environment, but I kind of didn't know the facts. And reading that book, which is both inspiring and also frightening, I kind of thought, you know, flying is kind of like, I'd have to really, really give it some serious thought before I fly. And when I'd been asked would I lead this team of fundraisers on this 1-year appeal, one of the draws for the guys was that they would go to India for 3 weeks to visit projects. And I'd said, I am not going to India. I've been to India enough, I don't need to connect with the projects to get inspiration. But actually, living with the guys over those first couple of months, I thought, I've got to go to India to be with them. They're not as experienced in India as I am. And, God, I'm going to start crying. Do you know how minds work? Because I don't know how I work. It just kind of bubbles up. So I decided that I would fly. And I was flying primarily because of my team. I wanted to be there with them to help them deepen their bonds together and to get the most from seeing the different projects that we work on in the urban slums of India. So I kind of put aside my reservations about flying and flew. Interesting enough, the night, I generally am quite busy, you can probably guess on what Lokabandhu was saying. So the night we're due to we have to get up at 4 in the morning to kind of get to the airport to fly. And I was pleased I managed to finish all the things I needed to finish at 12:30 to go to bed, to get up at 4. And the phone rings at 1:30, my mobile phone. And I kind of, oh, damn. So I pick up my mobile phone, and it's a colleague in India who's arranged our train travel from when we get to Mumbai. And he's saying, where are we? And I'm saying, we don't arrive till tomorrow. And he goes, I had you down as arriving on the 16th. And I said, no, we arrive on the 17th. Oh, okay. Are you okay to stay there and meet us tomorrow? So he kind of agrees to meet us. Anyway, so we arrive in Mumbai at the airport, and our friend is there to meet us at 3 in the morning. And we didn't have tickets. So those of you, who's been to India here? Put your hand up if you've been to India. So we haven't got reservations to travel on the train. And my friend is saying, wait one more day, we can send you in a coach, a luxury coach. And I'm saying, no, the schedule is so tight, we need to go by train. And he's saying, yeah, but you'll have to travel in the general class, which is kind of slatted benches, packed in, 19-hour train journey. Yeah, it's not that long, but it's reasonable. And I say, we're going, we'll be fine. So we kind of get on the train, and we're kind of negotiating places on people's benches. Anyway, we get there, it's fine. But when we arrive in Nagpur, this is a funny story. So as I get off the train, the guys are following me off the train. I get off the train, and suddenly a bunch of guys come forward, and they want to take my photo and want to have their photo taken with me. And the guys who are travelling with me sort of think, God, that's so impressive that the guys knew which carriage we were in and where Jayaraja would be. And so they're filming it and taking photos of me with these Indian guys, you know. And then I sort of, the guys kind of disperse, and they say, I sort of say, okay, now we've got to find Teja Dharma, the guy who's meeting us in the station. And he said, isn't that him? And I said, no, I've never met those guys in my life before. But it's kind of in India, in Nagpur, in those kind of cities, have a white face kind of is, it's kind of like really different than the kind of like, oh, pleased to see you. Anyway, so then we find Teja Dhamma. He takes us to our place, and we see workshops. But that's not the story I want to tell you about. So we then we see various projects in different cities, and some of the projects really kind of touch you deeply. And one of the ones that touched me most deeply was it's an open school with a rag picking community. Do you know what a rag picking community is? In India, you've got this thing called the caste system. So people are they're kind of, for generation upon generation, their family has done particular tasks. And there are people who are considered that what their task is in life is to be rag pickers. And they feel both safe in that environment because it's what they've always done and always known, but it doesn't give them any possibilities and options. And so if you've ever travelled in India and you see the kids scavenging along the railway tracks, it's often rag-picking communities. Anyway, we've helped open a school, an open school, so as these kids can sometimes come. And it's not a structured school, as in you have to be there. It's at any time, just to facilitate them getting some education. And one of the girls who'd been there was just about to graduate. She was the first girl to graduate. Again, I'm going to... graduate, you know, sort of past the 15-year-old exam. So we went to her home in the slum and met her mother. So this girl was 15 years old and had obviously worked really hard to graduate. And then you kind of hear the stories about how she did drop out of school. You know, that her mother was ill, her mother was disabled, and she's looking after her mother. She, at one stage, I think, got malaria. And so those kind of things stop people continuing their education. And this girl was going to graduate. So that was, for me, meeting this girl and knowing that she was going to graduate through the work that I had been involved with is really meaningful, really deep. But it's a real tragedy that there are communities that often society expects of them, and sometimes what they come to expect of themselves is so narrowing. But then we're leaving Amaravati, and the one thing I'd said to my guys is I wanted to go and visit Ajanta Caves. Anybody been to Ajanta Caves here? Ajanta Caves are these ancient Buddhist caves that were rediscovered at the start of the 19th century, I think, by a British colonel who was out hunting tigers. And he kind of found these magnificent caves, something like 25 of them. You know, some of the caves are, you know, bigger, certainly much bigger than this dome. You know, they can hold hundreds of people. Anyway, so my guys were visiting the different caves, and we go into one cave, and this one cave has just got a big stupa, you know, sort of, there's a few stupas around the site, if you don't know what a stupa is. And it's just got a real atmosphere of meditation. And we sit down, and we get our meditation gear out. I had my meditation gear, the other guys maybe got by with cushions or whatever, and we sit down and start meditating. So suddenly this cave, I think it's cave number 7, is transformed from a tourist site to a meditation site. And as people come in, you know, and they're all sort of cameras and rabbling, the atmosphere changes, and then everybody starts to sit. Everyone starts to sit in meditation. And eventually the guy who's responsible for the guardian of the temple, you know, of this particular cave, and making sure the tourists are doing their thing, comes up and shakes me and says, "You can't meditate. Everybody is meditating. You have to go." And it's kind of like, I thought how sad that was. That, you know, oh, people are meditating in this tent, in this cave. But the nature of, can you make the connection between what happens? The idea of self, you see what other people are doing and how it transforms. So that was quite a beautiful thing, you know. It's kind of like suddenly as we stood up, because we were the first ones to stand up after he told us, and there's all these other people sitting, and we kind of walk out. It felt really beautiful to kind of honour that lineage of Buddhists over centuries who had sat and meditated in that cave. So when we left from Amaravati, we'd been waiting to find out whether we'd got reservations on the train from Amaravati to Pune. Again, it wasn't quite such a long journey, it was only 13 hours. Actually, I think the train was ran slightly late, so it was about 15 hours. But again, I'm saying to my Indian hosts are saying, no, wait, Jayaraja, wait another day, we'll get you a reservation tomorrow or the day after. I'm saying, actually, we need to be there because we're going to see this project or that project. So we've got to go. We'll be fine. So we get on the train and we're walking along with our rucksacks. And one of the guys, there's 6 of us. One of them's Indian, one of the guys in my team, who actually came, Sanganath is his name. He came through the projects. He'd actually, when he was a kid, went to a project, an arts project, about theatre and drama, and that's how he first made his connection with Buddhism. And so from doing that, he ended up, long circuitous story, he's ended up in England working as a professional fundraiser, door-to-door fundraiser. And it's a delight having him, just sort of seeing this confidence of a guy whose community, in his community, when he goes back to his village, he's treated so differently now. He says it's kind of like people respect him because he's been to the West. But he's from a single parent family. You know, his father died when he was very young, and he was, you know, his background, they would be considered untouchable. Yeah, but he's kind of in the UK. His confidence is kind of radiant, so much so that he can knock doors in London, and he is a good fundraiser. Yeah. Anyway, so he's amongst us, and we're kind of walking along from carriage to carriage, trying to find a bit of space on the train for 6 of us. And then I come between a carriage, I'm at the front, and I come into between a carriage, and there's one guy standing in this carriage, the separation between the 2 carriages, but he's got a pile of bags, and I sort of think, we can pile our bags on here, we can stand here, at least that'll be okay, you know, maybe for about 7 hours, and then we'll find somewhere else. And as I stop there, some guy jumps on the train from the platform and says, no, you can't stop there, you can't stop there, this is Maharashtra Boxing Club. And I said, I'll fight them. And they laughed and said, no, you can't. And I said, okay. So anyway, I said to Sanganath, you go in front. find us somewhere where you sort of think we're going to be okay for a short while. So he goes ahead and we stop, and there's just a little bit of space, you know, perched on the edge of people's benches, because everyone's kind of reserved, you know, you reserve a bed. It's kind of probably about less than 6 foot, but about 5'10", and they're about that narrow, and there's 3 of them, and 3 of them there. And then you've got another 2 here. So we're kind of perched in different places. But we're keeping our eye open for when anybody's going to get off the train, because we're going to, as soon as anybody gets off the train, we're going to try and get their bunk. Yeah, and we get one bunk here and we get one bunk there, and then there's this whole family going to move, and we see them sort of packing up their food and getting ready, and I'm sort of saying to the guys, look, there's a whole carriage, you know, 6 booths were going to be made. But as the family are packing up, you know, being Western and polite, I'm actually going to wait for them to get out before going in. But the boxing club, who are also in the same scenario as soon as they see these guys get up, they're in. 2 to a bench. And then all right, okay, we've lost that. Now, on this, this guy gets on the train, and he's 80 years old, Colonel Man Singh. And he sort of says to me, you can share my bench. And then he starts talking to me. So why are you travelling in India? You know, and I'm sort of saying, actually, I'm here. I'm a Buddhist. I work for a Buddhist charity, and we're kind of here to visit the projects. And he said, oh, Buddhism. I would like to be a Buddhist. I would like to be a Buddhist. I read a book recently. He said, Living Ethically. I said, Living Ethically, that's written by my teacher. He said, I want him to be my teacher. My teacher too, tell me. So we're kind of chatting. Man Singh, this guy is absolutely delightful. 80 years old, a mind that's as sharp as a razor and interested in everything. And he's saying, oh, I could help your charity. I have run businesses. I'm a retired engineer in the army, colonel. And he's kind of telling me. Anyway, so I noticed the boxers are all there, kind of crowded in. And occasionally they would come and they're kind of, who is this guy? And one of these boxers is kind of really, he's maybe a little bit bigger than me, but he's solid. He obviously does a lot of weights. And I don't know what prompted me, but those of you who know me will know. I kind of sort of said to him, God, look at your muscles. And he's going, oh. I said, big, strong guy. Oh. I said, do you want an arm wrestle? And he said, okay. So we have an arm wrestle. And those of you who know me will also know that I didn't lose. So I beat him at arm wrestling, and he's kind of a bit puzzled, and we'll do it again, and I beat him again. So then all his mates are kind of like, hey, I want an arm wrestle, you know. So I'm arm wrestling all his mates, and I have to kind of sort of say, no, my right arm's killing, left arm. And I beat them all, and they're kind of big guys, and they're on their way to the Maharashtra State Boxing Championship. And then they've all wrestled me, they've all been beaten, that's fine. And I sit down and carry on my conversation about Buddhism and the meaning of life with Man Singh. Then their boxing coach comes through to see that they're doing okay, because there's about 30 guys and they're all spread out along the train. So the boxing coach comes along, he's a big guy, and they kind of start talking to him, and they point to me, and he kind of looks at me, and he says, So I think he wants an arm wrestle, which is what he does. And I beat him really easily, and he can't understand it. And he sort of says, I'll be back 5 minutes. I'll be back 5 minutes with champion. So I kind of carry on my conversation with Man Singh. And this guy comes in, and he's kind of, he's a little bit taller than me, but he's very broad. He's probably about 20 kilos heavier than me. But he kind of walks like this. You know, he's kind of really got presence, really kind of, I sort of think, oh my God. And I turn to Sila Joel and I say, looks like I'm about to lose. Because he just looks so strong and so confident. Anyway, so he says, the coach says he's come to wrestle you. And I say, he hasn't got a right to wrestle me. He hasn't got a right to wrestle me. I said, these guys I've fought these guys. If he wants to fight me, he has to beat this man here. And I pick, obviously, the best one. So as I can get him to sort of see how good he is and sort of also tire him out a bit. So he wrestles this guy, and he beats him, but it's close. And I sort of think, oh, I think I might be able to win. Anyway, lo and behold, I do win. But by this stage, the whole train is kind of crowded around, and there's people hanging on the berths there like this, and it's filmed. You can actually see it on YouTube, Jayaraja. Jayaraja arm wrestling. If you put that in, you'll see me wrestling this guy. And there's people shouting, "Go India, India, go!" And there's all the shouting, and it's there kind of like, but within quite an early point, I can arm wrestle anybody afterwards. I'll show you. Within any point, I sort of realise, hey, I'm in with a chance here. This guy is strong, but I'm in with a chance. And I'm kind of blowing him kisses to try and put him off. And then I win. But then the guys are shouting, "You cheated, you cheated, you cheated. Rematch, you were kind of holding on to that." And Man Singh is he's my friend now, and he's saying, "Look, he has beaten you all. It is a shame on India. You want him to fight again, you know." Absolute uproar in the carriage. Anyway, so I wrestle him again, and I beat him a second time. And he's very gracious about it, and they go off. But so that's just a story about me and my ego. Forgive me for that. But what it does is I'm kind of Man Singh, as the train, it's kind of travelling. And we've only been on the train 4 hours now. There's still another 8 hours to go. And the train is filling up more and more. And my guys, we've lost our one bench where we had our bags, and we're now sort of scattered around sharing. And Man Singh is sort of saying to me, "Share my bench, share my bench." And I'm sort of thinking, as people are starting to sleep, I'm sort of thinking, this guy is 80 years old. Tomorrow morning, when we get off this train, I am going to be really stiff from the length of journey and sleeping, you know, if I had the bench to myself, I'd be stiff. And this 80-year-old bloke, he is going to, having shared his bench with me, is going to be even stiffer. So I'm kind of sat perched on a little bit, and he keeps saying, "No, sleep, sleep, spread out, spread out." And I'm sort of, okay, all right. And then I kind of sit gingerly. But as I'm travelling through the night and the train fills, and I can't sleep because I've just got a tiny little bit of bench and I don't want to disturb him. My guys are sleeping. The one bench we have, there's a guy who's 6'4" sleeping on it. And there's one of the boxers who's about 6 foot, is kind of worming his way along, gradually from sort of having his elbow on to his arm. And the kind of two of them are on this bench that's about this wide and the legs sticking out. On the floor, where my feet are there's two guys sleeping there, there's two guys sleeping there. The train is absolutely packed. And if anybody needs to walk along, they kind of have to sort of balance. The train is so full. And I just notice I'm completely full of love. Now, it could be that I've won the arm wrestle and I might have felt differently. But actually, what it strikes me was that there was space for everybody. Everybody had a space on that train, and there was kind of consideration. And in the crowded world, that there was kind of care. There was even some woman in between the carriages. You get these metal plates. Have you seen them? That link. And there's somebody even sleeping on the metal plates. How they managed that, I do not know. But I couldn't. I had a seat and I couldn't sleep. So that was what I wanted to talk about when I was thinking about this crowded world. It struck me that the kind of sense of connection, there was space for everybody. On the final bit of the journey, we actually had reserved seats. The tragedy of reserved seats, in that we're in air-conditioned car chair. And everyone sat in their chairs, it's air-conditioned, there's no communication, no sharing of food. That was the other thing, everybody shared their food with us. Whereas when people didn't, there was no conversation between people. So people are less connected. Now the population of the world is increasing, dramatically. I think it's doubled in the time I've been alive. Yeah, so it's doubled since 1960. It's doubled from 3.1 million to over 6.2 billion. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. So the idea of the self, if we think about the self ends at our skin, there is not going to be enough space for the world. Now, but actually the self is an idea that both of our brain, our mind, and our connection, our relationships. when we start to move towards a sense of, actually, I'm related. I'm not just related to human beings, but I'm related to the whole environment. I'm related to the whole world. When we start to do that, there is going to be enough space, and we'll start to find our creativity. But what happens is fear that we won't be happy, or we won't get what we need, kind of makes us feel more protective of ourselves. You know what I'm talking about? So we kind of need more. In the Western culture, there's, you know, the amount of material possessions we've got. I often sort of think that if I was, the kind of style of life I have now would be that of a, you know, a king back in the Middle Ages. You know, I can have a hot shower anytime I want. Yeah. I can't have a bath because we haven't got one, but I can, you know, go to the next community. But every day I eat enough. Yeah, every day I eat enough, and the choice of food is incredible. I do try and think about where my food comes from, and I do try and check. But we do need to move towards a sense of actually realizing our relationship, the self, is that connection between others and the environment. It's not separate. So I'll finish, I'll read a poem. Oh, it's in my pocket. And again, you know, you might sort of think a normal talk kind of goes linearly towards a poem. This is more like, you know, a chaotic guy sort of saying, oh, look at that, oh, look at that. So this, you'll have to see how it's connected. But I know it's connected somehow, and we'll see if you can make the connection. It's from a friend of mine called Manjusra, called Holy. Like many on the spiritual path, I can get hung up on highfalutin metaphysics. But the real test is when I'm sitting alone in my car at the traffic lights. Where I am when the signal does its star turn from red to green via yellow. These are, of course, all symbolic colours, especially to Buddhists. The red of infinite bliss, green of lightning, quick compassion, yellow of inner riches. But as the engine misses a beat, is this what I dwell upon? Or is my mind unseen racing forward to the supermarket? Or cursing the pedestrians for being so pedestrian? Or thinking about nothing at all except its own gloom? Yet Blake said, everything that lives is holy. And that includes myself serving time at the traffic lights, lost out of view of those who think better of me than I do. I'll read that last stanza again. Yet Blake said, everything that lives is holy. And that includes myself serving time at the traffic lights, lost out of view of those who think better of me than I do. So, just to make sure I've done my bit of Karana, we're looking for people to join the 1 year appeal, to live in a crowded community in a noisy city to transform people's lives. I've got some literature about Karana. If you know of anybody who would really enjoy living in a crowded community with a bunch of guys doing a really ridiculous thing like knocking on strangers' doors to transform the world, do come and see me. And before we finish, turn around and look at the people here. And thanks for coming. Have a great festival.
Just one question.
Yeah?
What's your secret in arm wrestling?
Pure strength. Okay, thank you.